Hi guys, welcome to the beautiful Wachau Valley. My name is Jan, I am with We Guide Vienna, and this is an introduction into the stories and the wines of the Wachau Valley. We are standing right now at the very beginning of the valley in the eastern part, a place where we can see the valley open itself in front of us and welcome us with its historical monuments and its beautiful landscape. No visit to Wachau is complete without visiting the largest town in the area, Krems. Krems is the hub for all visitors coming into the Wachau. We have a train station here, a bus station. This is also an important place where all the river cruises dock, and for good reasons. This is a very lively cultural town with about 20,000 inhabitants, so there's plenty of shops everywhere. And it's also a historical place. One of the landmarks in Krems is its gate tower, known as the Steiner Tor, and you can see it right behind me over here. It's a beautiful Renaissance tower that has been standing here for nearly 500 years, and it marks really the wealth that was in the town here. Otherwise, Krems is very popular today among travelers to the Wachau Valley. Of course, coming in with the train, with the buses, with the ships, you do a proper stop in Krems. It is advisable. The town is also known for a rather prestigious university where students can learn different subjects, of course, dentistry among them, very popular. And you can quickly understand why the students would choose to study here. This region is surrounded by wine production, so there's enough things to help you study. And then there's the maximum security prison, which nobody really talks about. That's Krems, and you will be coming here with us on your journey in the Wachau. The microclimate created by the river Danube has made this area perfect for wine production. This is something that the Romans discovered nearly 2,000 years ago, and pretty much since then wine has always been produced here. In the Middle Ages, they wanted to expand the area a bit more. The valley is not that big, and especially the valley floor is very limited and often prone to floodings by the river Danube. So what the monks did? Well, they did something very tough and hard. They started creating these terraces that you can see behind me. They chopped into the side of the hills, creating one of the most characteristic traits of the Wachau Valley, and also creating a space where we grow some of the best wine in Austria. With over 1,000 historical monuments in the valley, there's enough stories to go around and satisfy a history geek like myself. One of my favorite monuments is here behind me. This is a battle memorial, a commemorative memorial of the Battle of Dürnstein that happened here on the 11th of November 1805. This was between Napoleon's French troops who were marching on Vienna along the Danube, who met an ambush of Austrians and Russian troops here in the Wachau Valley. It was a bloody affair, and cannonballs can still be seen stuck in the walls in the two villages nearby, and in the end the French had to retreat across the river before they could march on to Vienna. It was claimed as a great success, a great victory for the Austrians, but mind you, just a month later you have the famous Battle of Austerlitz, also known as the Battle of the Three Emperors, where the new Emperor of France, Napoleon, met the Emperor of Austria, allied with the Emperor of Russia. And who won? Well, Napoleon did. There's a little myth associated with the Battle of Dürnstein that happened here. And that one references a waltz, probably the most famous waltz there is. You've probably heard of it. It's called On the Blue Danube by Johannes Strauss the Elder. And if you've ever traveled in Austria on the Danube, you'll quickly notice that the Danube isn't all that blue. Actually, it's a bit green and brownish. So this has left a lot of people with a question mark. You know, why the Blue Danube? Why on the Blue Danube? And well, that's where we may find a little origin behind that name with this battle. Because you see, when the dead French soldiers were tossed into the river, wearing their blue uniforms, their bodies would float past Vienna. And apparently, one of the citizens then remarked, using the black humor that the Viennese are known for, that the Danube was blue today. And hence giving the rise to the mythical name behind the waltz on the blue Danube. The Wachau Valley is a small wine producing area, and it has about 800 families that produce wine here. A total average is around 10 million bottles of wine per year, which is tiny compared to the rest of Austria and especially compared to other wine regions around in Europe. This has forced about 1/3 of the families to come together to share resources and create a community of wine production. Today it's called Domäne Wachau. They've been around since the 30s, and they have some of the widest and biggest selection of wines you can find here in the Wachau Valley. I highly recommend you check them out, and if you come on one of our tours, we'll go down to the cellars and explore the underground world of the wine production. If you ever had a bottle of wine from the Wachau, big chances are you had it from Domäne Wachau. And then again, big chances are that you've seen this little castle on the sticker. Well, we are at the very heart of the production of Domäne Wachau here. They are the biggest actor in the valley, representing about 1/3 of the production here. That means 3 to 4 million bottles of wine are produced here per year, and they also have the biggest reach market-wise. They export the wines to America, to Scandinavia, rest of Europe. Germans are a big importer of the Austrian wines, and as well as China and Australia. So they pretty much cover all of the world. Here at the very western edge of a village called Dürnstein, you get this beautiful panoramic view over the river Danube, which is probably the most essential natural factor in the whole valley. It created the valley many million years ago, and because of the many bends it has in the river, it creates microclimates for the wines to enjoy. The village itself, the village of Dürnstein that is tiny. About 500 people live here, but it is super charming and probably the most popular village of them all. It was very wealthy as well, because here you had a toll booth. All the trade that happened on the river, well, they had to come through here, pay their taxes, and then could continue on. This made this village very, very rich, and you can see this by the beautiful architecture around. Another factor of importance in Dürnstein is the castle. Perched on the cliff, overlooking both the village and the river, this castle is legendary. Not because of the castle itself, but because of a certain English king who was imprisoned in the castle in 1192. Making your way up to the Dürnstein castle might be one of the most challenging endeavors you'll do in the Wachau Valley. But trust me, it is well rewarded, and look at that amazing view. This is also the same view that Richard the Lionheart would experience during his time as a prisoner here. He was well treated and spent the winter months of 1192 to 1193 here in Dürnstein before he was moved on to prison in Germany. All in all, he would spend 2 years in captivity, while the English gathered the money for his ransom. At that time, it was astronomical. Still today, it is a lot. It was around 20 to 30 metric tons of silver. For England, that meant a period of financial difficulties. Every English had to pay 1/4 of their possession to release a king. That was not even much in England. These circumstances gave rise to one of the most beloved legends of that time. And for sure you have heard of this guy who would run around in the woods, steal from the rich and give to the poor. Yes, Robin Hood. For Austria, there was the beginning of a prosperous time. they got all this money. They could build a bunch of city walls for a bunch of cities all across Austria, which would mean safer trade, more prosperity. And there was even enough money to build a brand new city called Wiener Neustadt, which is just about 1 hour south of Vienna. And this was also another beginning for Austria as an actor in the big politics, on the big stage, with the big boys of Europe, the big powerhouses like France and England. And from then on, Austria would just grow more and more powerful, bigger and mightier. You might have noticed that Castle Dürnstein today lies in ruins. It is maybe unnecessary to say that during Richard's time here in Dürnstein, it was not in ruins. Actually, it was brand new. It was about 40 years old and it was the most modern castle in the area. But unfortunately today, like many other castles and fortifications in the Wachau Valley, they are all in ruins, all destroyed. And the reason for this are the Swedes. We can blame the Swedish for this. Twice in history, they waged havoc across Europe. First time was together with the Norwegians, our countrymen. Yeah, we spread the redheads all across the world. Good times. But the second time we weren't invited. And this was during the wars of religion when the Protestant Swedes were fighting the Catholic Austrians in the 17th century. So they came all the way here, nearly made it all the way to Vienna. And while they were ravaging this countryside, they destroyed every castle and fortification they came across. They were pretty badass, notoriously destroying over 1,000 castles in Central Europe during this terrible conflict that lasted 30 years. I guess today they make up by building furniture. Yeah. The beautiful Wachau Valley is nothing without its most important feature, which is the Danube River itself. You can see the current is fairly strong, and behind me you can see the village of Dürnstein with the castle ruins on top of the hill above it. The river is the most important feature. It is what created the valley itself many million years ago. It carved its way through the granite rocks and created this ideal climate for wine production that the grapes enjoy today. It is also what linked Wachau with the outside world. Merchants traded wine across the Danube, and it connected Austria with the rest of Europe, both west and east. The river is about 3,000 kilometers long. It starts in the Black Forest of Germany and runs out into the Black Sea in the east, crosses half a dozen countries and 4 or so capitals. Today, it is also one of the most popular ways to see Central Europe. River cruises bring people and charter them across these countries, and Wachau is definitely one of the most important sites along this trip. But if you're not into river cruises, all the people take to their bikes. We have the Eurovelo number 6, which is one of the longest biking trails that practically follows the Danube from Central Europe to the Black Sea and runs about 2,000 miles in its length. So when you come to the Wachau Valley, you'll see the river for sure, and definitely a lot of bikers. The Danube is very important in the valley, but it's also very hazardous, and occasionally there are floods. The last big one was in 2013, and the water levels rose nearly 10 meters high. And since then, they've done massive works to protect the villages from these floods. Walls have been put along the valley, and hopefully they will protect the villages next time the Danube decides to rise. Between the village of Dürnstein and the next village of Weißenkirchen, there's a path that leads away from the main road and brings you here to this little oasis where we can really come close to the terraces that really are characteristic here in the valley. This is one of my favorite parts of the Wachau. These terraces have been here for a long time. Practically ever since people started growing grapes here, they found out that they needed more land, more space to grow these, and so they started chopping into the side of the hills, creating these wonderful terraces. Mind you, it was all done by hand, and you cannot imagine the amount of work that went into this. These terraces form a bit of a challenge for the harvesters today, because you cannot really fit a tractor, and also, more importantly, there is a rule and a principle here in the Wachau that all harvest has to be done by hand. So we have 3 harvests, not only 1, but 3. So 3 times the farmers have to go up these terraces and pick the grapes. Now we have 3 harvests here because since the 80s, they've started categorizing the white wines into 3 qualities, 3 stages if you want, depending on the harvest, which means depending on the amount of alcohol in the wine. The light ones being harvested first in September, sometimes in August if the season was very nice. The second harvest is in October, and then the last one is in late October, November. These 3 categories makes it easy for people to pick out the wine that suits their needs. The first wine category is very light. It is named after a grass that grows up in the terraces, a fluffy light grass, and that is the reference to the first quality of the wine, which has an alcohol maximum alcohol percentage of 11.5. The second quality is called Federspiel. Now Federspiel was this lure dummy that was used during falconry. In medieval times, people wanted to hunt with the falcon, and they had to train these birds, and they used this very special kind of lure dummy. Now the reference here is a bit tricky. It has to do with the flight of the falcon being very balanced and elegant, yet very strong. And this is how the middle category wine should be experienced. This has a maximum alcohol amount of 12.5%. Now the very last one and the very high-end quality is called Smaragd. This comes from the name of Smaragd Eidechse, which translates to emerald green lizard. These lizards are found all across the valley, and they love to sunbathe. They love to soak up the rays, and the reference is pretty clear that the grapes for the high-end wine, they are out the longest. They are out in the sun for the longest duration, soaking in the sun and creating a wine that is richer and a more full body experience. These wines have a minimum alcohol percentage of 12.5 and then can go up. These terraces have been split up into different parcels. All of these have different names, and because of the many microclimates in the valley, they have, of course, different characteristics. And they can be easily recognized on the bottle, on the label. You can read what terrace plot they are from. One of the most famous ones is called Achleiten, which is one of those terraces that is closest to the river, and you can see that behind me. It is very close to the water, gaining access to the cool air that flows together with the river, giving it a feature that many other terraces are not privy to. When you are exploring the Wachau Valley, it is almost natural and expected that you become thirsty at one point. Well, in the valley, that's no problem. We have hundreds of different Heuriges and Weingoods. These are special restaurants that serve you the freshest wine from these very fields. And if you come across one in Weißenkirchen, the village where we are now, called Mang, I recommend you checking that one out. It is one of the most beautiful wine gardens you'll find in the area, and they have delicious food that you can order next to your wine. Now, mind you, they have special regulations when it comes to these wine estates. You cannot order a hamburger or a beef. You can only order cold cuts. But that is nonetheless very tasty and fits perfectly with the fresh young wine that they produce here. The Wachau Valley can be easily split into two parts, a warm one and a cold one. The wine production is mostly in the warm part of the valley, and the village of Spitz marks the transition between the warm and the cold. But that doesn't mean that nothing is happening in the cold part. In fact, one of the bigger fruit industries are located here, and Austrians love one particular fruit above anything else, and that is the apricot. So the cool part of the Wachau Valley is dominated by that industry. It also has a lot of historical monuments. There is the famous castle ruins of Achstein that offers a phenomenal view over the Danube and the valley. But I think the crown in the jewel, or rather the jewel in the crown, is the Venus of Villendorf, this lady over here. We are standing on the site of the findings of Venus of Villendorf, a phenomenal finding that was discovered in 1908, where they uncovered a statue about the size of a phone. So not this one, this is a sculpture, obviously. But the original one is about 24 centimeters. And she's dated to be 25,000 years old, making her one of the oldest sculptures we have uncovered from the Old Stone Age that depicts a human form. 25,000 years ago. That's about the same time we started domesticating the first animal ever, which was the dog. Yeah. So you can come here, you can see the statue, of course. You can see the excavation site, which is not very big, but you can also go to the Museum of Natural History in Vienna, where they have this lovely exhibition about the prehistoric cultures and settlements here, and there were many. This valley is enjoyed by us today, but traces, obviously, show that people have been enjoying the scenery for nearly 25,000 years. And you can see the statue in the museum. It's really, really small, but very cute. The Wachau Valley ends in an impressive way in the west. Perched on cliffs and overlooking the Danube stands one of the most famous religious centers in Central Europe. This is the Melk Abbey, and it's celebrated as a wonderful example of High Baroque, a style in art and architecture that would dominate Austria in the golden age of the Counter-Reformation. The Melk Abbey, together with the Wachau Valley, make up a UNESCO cultural landscape like no other. A full experience of the Wachau Valley is incomplete without visiting the beautiful Melk Abbey. I hope you enjoyed this little adventure through the Wachau Valley. We touched upon many stories, we saw many sights, tasted many wines, but these are mere little tastes of what is awaiting you. Everything is so much better if you're here in person and experiencing this whole thing for yourself. Check us out on weguidevienna.com. Check the link below. Also like this video if you did like it. Share it to your friends and other fellow travelers who are looking for an adventure in Austria. I'll see you here.